Welcome to the Horror Next Door. This is all the horror movies we watched in May of 2023. Links to our Letterboxd accounts are in the description box below. If you like this video, would you kindly subscribe?
The Devil's Reign from 1975, which we watched on Shudder with Joe Bob. I had actually just watched this film for the first time a couple years prior to this, simply because I was trying to check out all of the John Travolta movies that I hadn't seen. I was aware that he was barely in this, and I think this was his first role, if I'm remembering correctly, but it was so funny to see, especially such a film. He hasn't really done a lot of stuff like this, obviously. So many well-known actors got their start in horror. It's crazy. But anyway, this movie can get a little bit boring at times, but it's also kind of wild. It's kind of crazy, especially towards the end when everybody is like melting, and there's some of the effects are kind of cool considering how old this is. It's kind of gnarly and gross at times, and then it's pretty weird when they like don't have eyes, and it's wild when Ernest Borgnine turns into Satan. It's just a crazy movie. It's a little bit all over the place, a little bit haphazard, but I think overall it's a pretty enjoyable time, and I would recommend watching it at least once.
I didn't particularly like this movie. I definitely think the last 10 to 15 minutes are probably the best part. It was kind of slow, in my opinion. If it wasn't for Joe Bob coming in and giving little trivia and things like that, then it probably would have been much harder to get through. But the last 10 to 15 minutes, it definitely goes off the rails and, shit hits the fan and all kinds of crazy stuff happens. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this movie, but if you have Shudder, watch it with Joe Bob. You will probably enjoy it more that way.
Children of the Corn, 2009, which we watched on a rented Netflix disc. Sob, sob, sob. I still can't believe that is ending soon. I need to get on top of watching as many discs as I can and get off of streaming. Anyway, what the hell is this mess? I really, really hated this. I gave this the lowest possible rating that I could. I thought that the casting of the kids was terrible. I don't know if this was a desperation situation. I don't know what this was, but something weird was definitely going on. There's nothing right about this. They tried to take all the exact same occurrences, beats, cues, etc. from the OG Children of the Corn film, just update it, and it couldn't have been done more poorly. The characters couldn't have been less likable. The acting couldn't have been worse, mostly from the kids. The Isaac wannabe kid was just whatever. I can't even talk about this anymore. I hated it, and I do not recommend it in any way, shape, or form.
So this is the remake that was made in 2009, and it was remade specifically for the Sci-Fi Channel. I'm pretty sure that right there just sums up what you will probably expect from this movie. Didn't really care for this one much at all. The lead actor looked pretty familiar to me, and after looking him up, I found out he was in the iZombie show. The one thing that I really just do not like about this movie is the lead kid. I don't even remember if they referred to him as Isaac or anything like that, but the lead kid that's, orchestrating all this stuff, he's just not, Isaac. Even in some of the sequels that we've watched, some of the kids that are like the lead kid were much better than this kid. And also, I just can't get over the fact that he's got this giant hat on. I don't know. It looks pretty dumb to me. Sorry. I do not recommend this movie.
Don't Panic from 1988, which we watched on Shudder with Joe Bob. Didn't even really know that this film existed. It was funny to hear the backstory about what the director's intentions were, the movies he was ripping off and things like that from Joe Bob. Namely, the whole Ouija board thing. I guess it kind of took off after Witchboard. He was just kind of trying to play off of the films that were popular at the time. Unfortunately, it's obvious that this was a blatant attempt to rip other things off rather than something made from the heart or something made out of pure love for filmmaking or being creative, or I'm not going to say there aren't some creative things in this. It's just that most of it is laughably bad and not in a fun Neil Breen, Tommy Wiseau samurai cop type of way, just in a I'm not having fun and when is this going to end type of bad. That is my personal opinion. I have friends on Letterboxd that really liked this and consider it a hidden gem and like a good bad movie. It just wasn't good bad for me. It was just bad. So I apologize, but unfortunately I can't recommend this one.
I have to admit, at the time of recording this video, I drew an entire blank of what this movie was. I had to actually go look it up and see screenshots from it to remember this movie at all. This is one of those movies where it's not very good. I probably wouldn't recommend it unless you are just in for a ridiculous, over-the-top movie that you're probably going to laugh at and just have a good time. For that, I would recommend it.
Children of the Corn Genesis from 2011, which I believe we watched on Tubi. Looking at this synopsis, cover, cast, nothing is ringing a bell. I can't remember this movie at all. Basically, this wasn't a Children of the Corn movie. This couple ended up at a random place in the middle of nowhere. I don't even remember how or why they got stranded or anything. I just remember the guy had a camera and the male half of the main couple found it and saw weird stuff on it or something, and he was taking 4,000 years to get it put back on the stand while his girlfriend was trying to distract the creepy dude. And it was really frustrating how long that scene lasted and how stupid it was that he was incapable of getting the camera he was trying to sneak a peek at back on the stand before the creepy dude came in. And then shit hit the fan and everything fell apart after that. It was like literally their undoing of what caused all the chaos and drama in this entire movie. I guess they were holding this child, singular, supposedly of the Corn, prisoner or something. I don't even really know what the creepy couple was doing, but the main couple was trying to help the kid, and then that's all I remember. There really wasn't corn, there really weren't children, plural, and I don't remember it, so I definitely don't recommend it. Somehow I rated this a half a star higher than the 2009 remake thing, so I guess there was something to it, but yeah, don't watch this.
This movie, in my opinion, is probably the worst Children of the Corn movie out of the entire series. And I only say that because it has nothing to do with the Children of the Corn. If you've even seen just the original Children of the Corn, there's nothing in this movie that resembles any of that. There's no cult of children running around. There's really no corn. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a script that was written about a couple that gets kind of kidnapped in this house by this guy that lives out in the middle of nowhere, and weird shit happens, and Dimension Films just got the script, added a few things in there, and slapped Children of the Corn on the title. There's your movie. But like I said, there's one kid, no cornfield, or if there was a cornfield, they barely showed the thing. It's mostly just these people stuck in a house the whole time. Hard pass on this one.
Children of the Corn Revelation from 2001. I can't recall where we watched this. It was probably a rented Netflix disc, but if it wasn't, then it was probably Tubi because Tubi has everything and is awesome. This, again, did not really feel like a Children of the Corn film. I guess it was more so than Genesis. The main woman, she's basically just trying to find out what happened to her grandmother. And, spoilers for anyone who hasn't caught up to movies from 2001 or cares enough about spoilers from a Children of the Corn sequel. It turns out her grandmother was one of the Children of the Corn back in the day, and I guess she bailed on the whole culty religious thing that the Children of the Corn are, and they came back for her and killed her, and then her ghost as a child was haunting the building where she lived. I guess I feel like the main actress was likable and did a decent job. There were just some basic horror elements that worked fine in this. Just okay. It was very run-of-the-mill. I guess it was less than average, but for a Children of the Corn film, I don't know how corny, I don't know how corny it really was. It's just kind of there. Would loosely recommend it if you're invested in trying to complete the Children of the Corn series. It's better than some of the other ones I mentioned clearly, so I guess I'll give it that.
Another random direct-to-video sequel in the Children of the Corn series. This one was also not very good, but at least it has children and at least it has corn. Also, Michael Ironside is randomly in this. I think the one thing about this movie that really threw me off was the fact that there's a apartment building that was built right in the middle of the cornfield. Why would you build a building there? It doesn't make any sense, but whatever. That's this movie. Yeah, I really don't know much else to say about this movie. It was pretty forgettable. It was better than the 2009 Children of the Corn, but not really saying that much.
Children of the Corn, Runaway from 2018. Again, not certain where we watched this, but it was probably a Netflix disc, and if it wasn't, it was probably Tubi. I suppose I would have to say that the main character in this film, I wasn't really connecting with her. I wasn't really a fan of hers. I didn't like her all that much, so it was hard to get invested in anything. I did notice in a diner scene randomly that Clu Gulager was in there, and I apologize. I've never really known how to pronounce that last name. I was like, wait, is that Clu Gulager? And then when the credits were rolling, and it said directed by John Gulager, I was like, oh my gosh, it had to be him. So then I went and looked at the cast, and it really was, and I couldn't believe it, but it really was him, and it was the voice. It was the voice that did it, but it was cool to see him in there. It was cool that it was directed by his son. Kind of like the last Children of the Corn. It's not a horrible horror film. It's just not really all that much of a Children of the Corn film. It's a little less than average. I appreciate the efforts that were made to drive a plot line and have some sort of substance, because the majority of the other Children of the Corn sequels did not do that. So I do give it kudos for that. And again, loosely recommend if you're a completionist and you just want to do all of the Children of the Corn series, you could do worse than this one.
Another random Children of the Corn sequel, this time apparently released by Lionsgate. So the one thing I did find interesting about this is that the lead actress is apparently part of the Cult of Children. Not sure if it's connected to the original. I don't really remember right now, but He Who Walks Behind the Rose took everyone else in the cult and left her alive. She escapes, has a kid, and is now living in another state, trying to live her life. But then obviously some weird shit happens. So I did find that to be a little interesting, that at least it connected some way to one of the other films or some of the previous films. I would probably recommend this one over some of the others, but don't go in with huge expectations or anything like that.
Children of the Corn 2020. I apologize, but I am again failing to recall where we watched this. I believe it was a rented Netflix disc. I'm looking at my Letterboxd thinking my rating's a little high because I was really irritated by this movie. And I do think that some of the things they changed up work. That little girl, she's a total creep. She's a complete psycho. That was good casting. Even though there were times where it was a little bit over the top, it was unnerving to watch this small girl do and say some of the things she was doing. They definitely went overboard with the He Who Walks frickin' corn monster abomination of bad CGI. It would have been way cooler if they had just shown little super quick snippets of this, who they also call He Who Walks, and just end it there. They don't say He Who Walks Behind the Rose, they just say He Who Walks. So it would have been cool to just see little quick snippets of He Who Walks rather than them revealing the whole thing and showing way too much of it. It was so bad. The ending was stupid. A lot of it was stupid. I don't know why I gave it the same rating as the last two Children of the Corn movies, because I definitely didn't like it as much. I'm probably gonna go knock it down a half a star, because now that I'm thinking about it and talking about it, I didn't like it. I don't recommend it.
So this is the newest and latest Children of the Corn film as of this recording. Actual theatrical release or even the straight to video release didn't happen until this year, 2023. So I'll say this, I think this movie started off pretty well. I was actually pleasantly surprised and was getting into it. But then I feel like somewhere around the middle, it started kind of going off the rails a little bit. Although this is a remake, I did find the aspect of showing us the kids pretty much killing all the parents in town concept to be pretty interesting. In the original and in some of the other ones, I believe, they show you a little bit, they cut to years later and the kids are just by themselves and there's no parents around. He Who Walks Behind the Rose shows up. They don't really show you anything. All you hear is his footsteps and you see the children looking at it and their reactions and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is cool. They should leave it like this. Don't show us the monster. Just leave it to our imagination to what this thing is. And they do this for a while. And I was like, okay, they're not going to show it to us. Like, they're committed to not showing it to us. But then they finally cut to it. And I was like, oh, man, why did you cut to it? You should have just left it as sound effects. I would definitely recommend this movie more than obviously the 2009 remake that was made for the Sci-Fi Channel, but it is what it is.
Fright Night from 1985, which we watched on my DVD. I know that I watched this a handful of times as a youngin'. I'm not sure exactly how or why, but there were a lot of things about this movie that I blocked out, didn't remember. I think there are quite a few things in this that are inappropriate for a child. Plenty of the horror things I was watching when I was little that applies to. But anyway, I see it through different eyes as an adult, that's for sure. And it made me like it just ever so slightly less. I think the main reason is just that our main dude, Charlie, he's a little bit too much of a hornball. It gets kind of annoying after a while. Repeatedly seeing the way he treats his girlfriend was kind of frustrating too. Regardless, you know, they're supposed to be teenagers, and overall the movie's still really cool. It's a fun movie. It's a cool take on vampires. Chris Sarandon does a good job as Jerry. He's got that look. He's got a look in his eye, and he's just believable as a suave dude that can seduce the ladies. There are lots of really fun vampire tropes in here that are played off in cool ways. I definitely recommend the movie. I think it's better than the remake was, even though the remake's decent, I guess. Maybe just because I like Anton Yelchin a lot. Rip. Watch this movie if you haven't. It's fun. I think that someone watching it for the first time now probably would find a lot of faults in politically correct type issues that don't bother me, because I miss in-your-face crap like this. And I think that's another reason I still really enjoyed watching it. I love 80s and 90s movies, especially 80s, because they just get away with whatever the hell they want. And it's annoying that everyone has to walk on eggshells these days. But end rant, just watch this movie if you haven't, and I hope you like it.
So I know this is going to sound blasphemous, but I have only seen the 2011 Fright Night movie. But that being said, I really like this one. As usual, I think this original blows the other one out of the water. The other thing that I actually found pretty interesting is the actress Amanda Bierce is in this, and I really only know her from Married with Children. I think that's probably the only thing I've ever seen her in. So to see her in this and be playing a serious role and not a comedic role was obviously pretty different for me, but I think she did a pretty damn good job. I guess I'm curious why she didn't do more horror movies in the 80s. I would obviously recommend this movie. If you have not seen it, check it out. I'm usually not into vampire flicks, but this one was pretty damn good.
Queen of the Damned from 2002, which I believe we watched on Tubi, but it doesn't look like it's up there anymore. If it is, Letterboxd isn't telling me that it is. I do own it as well because, y'all, I legitimately love this movie. If you like the late 90s, early 2000s horror vibes, you will love this. The way people dress, the music, the way they speak, just everything. It's grand. I get so nostalgic. And also, Aaliyah, may she rest in peace. I love her. I feel as though I was just beginning to become like a mega fan of hers when she passed away. And it was in part because she started doing films. And it's so sad that she couldn't do more. I blatantly remember an interview with her where she was talking about how she was really excited to do more films. She was supposed to be in Matrix sequels, and that would have been so fucking cool. I just think she was so talented and so beautiful. And a part of me gets really sad when I watch this because she really was taken way before her time. But anyway, tangent over. I think the only like super corny, super ridiculous, super bad part of this is when Lestat first resurfaces after hiding for hundreds or thousands of years, I can't recall, and he's just like laying on top of some amp with his shirt open, singing, and the band that's practicing looks over and sees him for the first time. Like, by far the worst thing in this entire movie. The soundtrack is fucking awesome. Jonathan Davis from Korn does the vocals. I mean, maybe you have to be from my generation like to appreciate this because it's got low ratings, and I know people talk crap about it, but I friggin' love this. I very highly recommend it because I think this is a gem and it is a comfort watch for me. And yes, just yes.
So this is my first time viewing this film. Hellcat has been trying to get me to watch this for a period of time now. It's not that I was trying to get out of watching it or anything like that. It's just, you know, things happen, new movies come out, you end up watching them. But anyway, here we are. We watched it. I remember seeing the trailers. I'm going to show my age here. I remember seeing the trailers and the commercials and stuff for this when it was released, just never saw it. Based on my memory of what I remember seeing from then, I guess I kind of always wrote this off as just some cheesy, early 2000s horror movie that was probably dumb. And again, I'm not really into vampires. So now here I am watching it for the first time, and I will say it's pretty damn good. Does it still have that early 2000 kind of cheesiness to it at times? Yeah, it does. But I think that kind of is part of the charm to it, I guess you would say. I also think the whole concept of this vampire guy being a rock star was pretty hilarious, but pretty cool at the same time. Like I said, there's like this cheesiness to it, but it's also kind of cool at the same time. Probably because I grew up in that time period. I don't know. I think I had way more fun watching this than I thought I was going to. So check it out.
Rest Stop, Don't Look Back from 2008, which we watched on a rented Netflix disc. Somehow, someway, Rest Stop popped into my head, and I remembered liking it pretty decently okay. It wasn't the best thing ever, very run-of-the-mill, very mid, but I remembered liking it, and I sort of wanted to watch it again. I realized that I had never seen the sequel, so I decided to rent that. It was so needlessly, uselessly complicated and convoluted to the point where I did not understand what was going on anymore, and because it's just a crappy sequel to an okay movie, I didn't care enough to rewind or read in-depth reviews or Google things to try to understand better. It's forgettable too. Like, I'm having a hard time remembering anything. I can't comment on gore or acting or plot because I just straight up don't remember. I remember these weird twins on this motorhome that were always like sucking on popsicles for some reason. Oh, I just remembered there's a main couple and the girlfriend is kind of just a bitch. Like, she's always in a bad mood. She's always complaining and she always just wants to get drunk. But then in addition to that, there's another annoying character, which is the main guy's best friend. And he's so annoying. The other part that I remember distinctly was him being trapped in a porta potty, a killer dude in a truck that's like a ghost, I think. I don't know. Running into the porta potty repeatedly and tipping it over, and the annoying guy getting all covered in nasty porta potty, gunk water, fecal matter. This movie's dumb. I don't recommend it at all.
I'm not going to blab about this movie too much. Honestly, I don't even remember watching the first Rest Stop, but apparently I did at some point in time. This movie was just ridiculous. It was all over the place. It kept jumping around a little bit. I don't even know. Like, people would die and then they come back. There's supposed to be some kind of like time manipulation going on around this rest stop. I don't know. Best thing I can say about this movie is that it has Steve Railsback in it. I love him. He's awesome. But other than that, I would not recommend this movie.
Night of the Creeps from 1986, which we watched on a rented Netflix disc. I never watched this movie when I was younger. It was one of the 80s horror flicks that I missed, but I had seen it before this viewing. It was a fun rewatch. I definitely think this is an enjoyable and memorable film. Tom Atkins and his humor and his smartass character are so great. It's definitely my favorite part. I do want to say that the two main boys that are our central characters here, I apologize for not remembering or caring to look up the character's name, but the blonde one, he's actually really annoying, weird, and not likable, but his best friend is awesome and hilarious, and I like him a lot. Despite not liking one of the main characters, it's still a fun movie, and I enjoyed rewatching it. I definitely highly recommend it. You have to think that future films definitely took a lot of notes from this. Slither comes to mind.
Another 80s horror film that I have never seen. So here we are watching it for the first time. Directed by Fred Decker, who directed one of my all-time favorite movies, The Monster Squad. This movie is known for having Tom Atkins in it. He's great. I love him in Halloween 3. I should probably just go and watch his entire filmography at this point. I also kind of thought it was funny that the lead character in this movie, the actor, Jason Lively, was in European Vacation. I kept saying to Hellcat, this guy looks so familiar. Where have I seen him from? And then she's like, oh, he's in European Vacation. I'm like, oh, that's him. I'm not going to blab about it forever. I like this movie. I really enjoyed it. It's another 80s classic that I'm finally getting around to seeing and really enjoying. So if you haven't seen it, check it out.
Willard from 1971, which we watched on a Blu-ray that my mom purchased for me. I had seen the remake with Crispin Glover, and I know that I liked it. I don't remember it super well, and I would like to revisit it, but we have another Ernest Borgnine movie here, or what's up? I was really liking this movie until Willard just turned on his rat friends. I don't understand what that was about. It was just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he did a complete 180 and turned into a complete dick. The movie went downhill from there. Obviously, as someone who wholeheartedly loves and has all of the compassion in the world for animals, I couldn't help but wonder how much of the possible harm that occurred when they were filming this was real and not, because I know that the standards for animal cruelty when filming were probably a lot lower back then. Couldn't help but have that in the back of my mind. I don't want to look into it, and I don't really want to know, but I think that affected my rating. And then again, it was a good flick. I felt sorry for Willard. I was sympathizing with him and stuff. Then he just turned into a jerk. I still think it's a really decent flick that I would recommend watching at least once.
So this is another movie I've never seen before. This is my first viewing. I always wanted to watch the remake with Crispin Glover, but just never gotten around to it. Although I enjoyed it and I thought it was a fun watch, it was a little lackluster, I guess, in my opinion. I guess I was expecting way more. I definitely didn't hate the movie, but I also didn't love it. But overall, though, I would probably still recommend it. But to me, it's just a right down the middle, average horror movie.
The Order from 2003, which I watched on a rented Netflix disc. I really wanted to rent this because it was one of the few Heath Ledger movies that I had not seen. I also really like Shannon Sossamon, and I didn't really know how you could go wrong with a horror film with both of them in it. I wouldn't necessarily say there was anything wrong with this movie. It's just very mediocre. There are a couple of moments that are actually very heart-wrenching. A lot of it's beautifully filmed. Heath Ledger's wardrobe in this film, come on. I don't know. There were so many things that I really liked about it. He looked awesome. He was an amazing actor. His chemistry with Shannon Sossamon is good. And it's hard to blatantly recommend this because I know that it's not for a lot of people. And I know that this is not a well-liked horror film. But my personal opinion is, yes, I do recommend watching it. I was actually thinking about buying it on DVD or something just because it's a timepiece. It's an early 2000s thing. I like the two lead actors so much. It's hard to explain exactly why. I guess I just think that for a horror film, there were a lot of exceptionally beautiful moments and that it was kind of a love story at heart, so I liked it. Mirror, Mirror 3, The Voyeur from 1995. I don't recall whether I ever spoke of Mirror, Mirror 2. Mirror, Mirror was a movie that actually creeped me out a little bit when I was little. There's something about it. There's this weird, dreary tone to it that it just irks me ever so slightly even to this day. But these sequels are insanely bad. This one specifically, Letterboxd still has it listed as a horror, which is why I'm mentioning that I watched it. But it was like softcore, Skinamax type stuff. I don't know what the heck this even was. It was super creepy to see Billy Drago in all these love scenes. And then Mark Ruffalo. Wowee. The fact that he was in Mirror Mirror 2 and Mirror Mirror 3 and then someday ended up in Marvel films is mind-boggling to me. There's a scene in this movie where he's making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and it's the weirdest thing. I mean, maybe this is on Tubi, by the way. I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier. If you want, you can literally just fast forward to that scene because it's so out of place and weird and awkward. I don't even know. It was hilarious. This almost felt as though it was trying to be a crime drama or something in the vein of Samurai Cop, and that's what parts of it reminded me of. I can't explain it. Anyway, I don't recommend this at all. I don't recommend any Mirror Mirror sequels. I think I was just tired and exhausted and trying to relax and put this on out of morbid curiosity, and I don't know how many more Mirror Mirror sequels there are, but I also don't know if I'm gonna watch them. So do yourself a favor and either fast forward the creepy Billy Drago sex scenes like I did so you can enjoy the crappy, hilarious crime drama wannabe stuff / the weird Mark Ruffalo stuff, or avoid it altogether. The last three films that I watched in May, I'm just going to lump all together because I have talked about them in the past. Brainscan from 1994, which we watched on my Scream Factory Blu-ray. The Autopsy of Jane Doe from 2016, which I rewatched on Tubi. And Terrifier from 2016, which I rewatched on I can't remember if it's a DVD or a Blu-ray. It's just a copy that I own. Regardless, all three of these movies are fantastic and amazing, and I highly recommend them all. Brainscan is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I couldn't recommend it more. The Autopsy of Jane Doe is a film that actually really creeped me out the first time I saw it. The atmosphere building, it's so unique compared to many other horror films that you will see. The tactics that they use to cause dread and fright are very creative. I really just wanted to see this again because it had been a while. It did not disappoint. Highly recommend. If anyone watching or listening to this channel doesn't know by now how obsessed I am with Art the Clown, I am. Watch Terrifier and Terrifier 2. They're epic. They're amazing. I'll never get sick of them.
Resident Evil Degeneration from 2008, which I watched on a rented Netflix disc. So I'm pretty sure I've seen this movie before, but did not remember very much about it other than the airport setting. I kind of wanted to just rewatch it because we had just watched Resident Evil Damnation and was pretty disappointed by it, and kind of realized that this one came out before Damnation. So I kind of watched Damnation and then jumped backwards to watch this one before I watched the other CG Resident Evil movie, which I'll get to in a minute. This movie is definitely better than Damnation, in my opinion. There's much more action going on. The setting is better. The story is better. In this movie from the video games, we have Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. There's an airport, zombies break out, planes crash, shit goes down. For it being 2008, the CG still kind of holds up. It doesn't look too bad. But like I said, this one just had a much more engaging story. I don't know. There was just something about Damnation that just bored the crap out of me. And I think it was just the storyline and everything. I don't know. I definitely recommend Degeneration. Go check it out. Resident Evil Vendetta from 2017, which I watched on a rented Netflix disc. So this movie from the video games, we have the characters of Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy and also Rebecca Chambers. This movie, in my opinion, was the best of the 3 CGI Resident Evil movies that are currently out. There is a new one coming out this year, so we will have to see if that one is better than this one. But in my opinion, this is the best one. I had a lot more fun watching this one than I did the other 2. At the very beginning of this movie, they go to a creepy old mansion. And honestly, I'm not even sure what this building even is, but it looks cool. And it reminded me a lot of the original Resident Evil mansion, the Spencer Mansion. And I was like, oh man, this is so cool. It was all dark and gritty and just great. The whole opening of the movie was awesome. Also, this is from 2017. The CGI looks much better than the other 2. There was a scene in the movie where Leon is on a motorcycle and he lures 2 or 3 zombie dogs away from what Chris Redfield's up to. And there's this whole scene with Leon riding on his motorcycle and being chased by these dogs, and they're going down like a freeway or something. And the whole time I was thinking, how are these dogs keeping up with this motorcycle? He's going pretty fast. Yeah, you could say they're zombie dogs, but I don't know. It was pretty crazy, and I was like, this is nuts. The other notable thing I will mention is there's a scene where Leon and Chris have this big shootout in this hallway with a bunch of zombies. And it was probably the coolest scene in the entire movie. Leon Kennedy goes full on John Wick in this scene. He's doing all the gun stuff that you would expect John Wick to be doing. It's pretty crazy. And to top it all off, towards the end of the scene, Chris Redfield does a jumping DDT to a zombie. And I completely marked out when I saw it. I was like, oh my God, he just did a DDT. It was awesome, which is probably another reason why I like this movie. I would highly recommend you check this one out.
As always, we thank you so much for watching. Leave us a comment if you have any horror movie recommendations, and we will add them to our watch list. Until next time.